The morning sun broke gently over the horizon, casting long shadows across Linda's porch, as if time itself were stretching. She stood at the edge of the steps, her hand wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee, steam curling up like a question she didn't have the energy to answer. It had been 2 years since Rusty, the golden-haired shadow that had once followed her everywhere, took his final breath on a faded quilt. 2 years since laughter had filled her small home at the edge of town. Now, everything felt muted. Even the wind seemed hesitant to speak. Inside the house, a frayed collar hung from a single nail above the fireplace. The name tag no longer shone. Rusty's bowls had long been cleaned and tucked away, but Linda could still hear the ghost of his paws tapping against the wooden floor each morning. Her sister Nana had tried to break through the silence, dropping off scones and handwritten notes. "The house misses you. I miss you." But grief had made Linda a quiet version of herself, not shattered, but dimmed. She didn't speak much anymore, except to whisper apologies to a memory. That afternoon, Nana sat beside her in the fading autumn light, pouring tea into a mug shaped like a dog's paw. A gift Linda had once given, back when she was still capable of giving anything. Nana didn't speak for a while. She just placed a hand gently on Linda's shoulder and breathed. "I'm not asking you to forget him. Just maybe consider that somewhere out there is a soul just as lonely as you. Maybe helping them come back might help you too." Linda didn't answer. She simply stared into her cup, watching the surface ripple with the lightest tremor, like a breath trying to be born. That night, alone in her room, she opened a cedar box tucked under her bed. Photos, Rusty in the snow, a crumpled birthday card, a tiny yellow raincoat. Her fingertips lingered on each piece, trembling not with sadness, but memory. For the first time she realized they didn't just hurt. They ached with tenderness. The next morning, with no ceremony or warning, Linda tied her hair back and buttoned her coat. The air was crisp, laced with the scent of drying leaves. As she pulled her car into the gravel driveway of the animal shelter she hadn't entered in years, her stomach twisted, not in fear, but with the weight of something long avoided. The wooden gate creaked open, a sound sharper than expected, slicing the quiet inside her. The shelter hadn't changed much. Same hand-painted sign faded from sun and rain. Same row of red maple trees standing like quiet sentinels. The scent hit her the moment she stepped through the doorway. A mix of disinfectant, damp fur, and something older, harder to name, like time left waiting. Her feet hesitated against the cool tile floor, but this time she didn't turn back. Flyers lined the walls, Polaroids of adopted dogs, each captioned in scribbled marker, "Found there forever." Linda's chest tightened. She remembered pinning up Rusty's photo once, years ago, when he first arrived, head tilted, eyes full of trust. Back then, she believed forever was a promise, not a hope. She moved deeper down the hallway, past the newer pens, into what the staff used to call the quiet wing. Dogs who'd been waiting the longest, dogs who no longer barked. At the very end, under a flickering fluorescent light, sat Kennel 19. There was no movement, no greeting, just a still shape hunched in the far corner. The dog, if you could call him that, looked more like a breath held too long. His coat was matted in patches of gray and brown, thin along the spine, shedding in uneven clumps. One eye clouded over. The other, amber and sharp, watched Linda without blinking, not pleading, not afraid, just watching. A soft exhale came from behind her. A young volunteer, maybe no older than 20, stepped quietly to her side. "That's Reggie," she said. 8 months here, no file, No microchip. No one's ever asked about him. He's not aggressive, just different. Linda didn't respond. She crouched slowly, letting her knees press into the cold concrete. She didn't reach through the bars. She just let the silence breathe. Reggie's chest rose and fell like waves too tired to crash. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Linda saw it. Not just loneliness, but recognition. The same quiet she had seen in the mirror every morning. The same silence that held grief, like a secret. As the fluorescent light flickered again, her eyes caught a glint around his neck, a worn leather collar with a brass tag, dulled by time, but still legible. If you're reading this, I was loved once. The words didn't slice, they sank, softly, like a whisper into old wounds. Linda's fingers curled against the floor, her eyes blurred. That message wasn't meant for the world. It was for someone who understood what it meant to have been loved, and then left behind. Reggie didn't move, not toward her, not away. But in his unmoving stillness, there was no apathy, only a strange kind of waiting. A stillness so deep, it echoed something familiar in Linda's bones. Like him, she had once sat too long in a corner of her own life, not expecting to be seen, just bracing for the next person to walk away. The volunteer, Mel, her name tag said, lingered, then gently stepped back, giving them space without words. And then, out of the quiet, another voice arrived. "You've come before." It was Maria, the older shelter caretaker with gray, threaded through her hair like silver stories. She walked slowly, her hand resting on the doorframe, her voice weathered but warm. "You never made it past the hallway, though." Linda nodded barely. Maria knelt beside her. "Reggie, he doesn't ask anything from anyone. Not because he doesn't care, just because too many asked things he couldn't give." She exhaled. "People want wagging tails, quick healing, but some hearts don't speak in the language of tricks and kisses. Some hearts speak in silence." Linda's fingers reached toward the tag again. She didn't take it, just touched the edge with one fingertip. The metal was cold, heavy with memory. "I was loved once." She felt it now not as a statement, but a question. Maria continued quietly. "He's been returned 3 times. Families said he didn't play, didn't bond. One woman said he felt like a ghost." Linda's eyes stayed on Reggie. "He's not a ghost," she whispered. "He's grieving." They sat together, the 3 of them, one woman, one dog, one memory keeper. Time moved around them, but within the kennel, it seemed to still. And then, Linda did something she hadn't done in years. She stayed. Not with a decision, not with a plan, but with presence. As the light flickered again, Reggie's good eye stayed fixed on hers. It didn't ask for promises. It only asked one thing. "Will you walk away like the others did?" Linda's answer wasn't a word. It was a breath. A quiet, inward breath that settled into her ribs like a seed. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something press back. Not joy, not even hope, but possibility. And so, when Maria stood and asked, "Are you sure?" Linda didn't say yes. She simply said, "I won't walk away again." The car door closed with a quiet click, a sound so soft it might have been mistaken for hesitation. Linda settled into the driver's seat, her hand resting on the wheel, fingers trembling ever so slightly. Reggie sat in the passenger seat beside her, motionless. He didn't look out the window, didn't turn his head, just sat, spine straight, gaze distant, like someone resigned to movement, not hopeful for where it might lead. Linda glanced at him, unsure what to say. Her voice, when it came, was gentle. "It's a short drive. The house is quiet." Reggie didn't respond, not with a shift, not even a blink. His breath fogged the glass lightly, a faint ghost of presence. Linda's words filled the silence like offerings, tossed into a still lake. There's a park nearby, big trees, lots of space. Still nothing. She turned the key. The engine hummed to life, and the gravel crunched beneath them as they pulled away from the shelter. The air inside the car felt too still, thick with unspoken things. Linda kept speaking, small, aimless phrases, not for comfort, but to hold back the weight of doubt growing in her chest. When they reached her small house on the edge of town, Linda parked beneath the sway of bare maple branches. She didn't rush, didn't unclip the leash immediately. She opened the passenger door and waited. And after a long pause, long enough for a breeze to roll a few dead leaves across the pavement, Reggie stepped down. Not eagerly, not warily, just with the heavy rhythm of someone used to leaving places behind. Inside, the house held its breath. Linda had prepared a quiet corner, a green cushion, a dish of soft food, a bowl of water, and a wool blanket that still faintly smelled of lavender. The same corner Rusty had once claimed, long ago. But Reggie didn't pause there. He passed it with a glance and laid himself down beside the wall, near the couch, facing away from everything. Linda stood still, her coat still half-buttoned, heart hammering behind her ribs. She didn't speak, didn't kneel, just watched. Watched the way his ears drooped. Watched the way his chest rose with deep, slow breaths, as if each inhale cost him something. The afternoon unfolded like a page turning itself. Linda didn't try to pet him. She didn't call him again. Instead, she opened the window just slightly to let the golden light seep into the room, warming the floorboards. She moved quietly, making tea, folding a blanket, adjusting nothing too quickly. Reggie didn't flinch. He didn't react. He was there, but not in the room. Like a ghost still deciding if it wanted to haunt the living. When dinner came, she set out 2 plates, one for herself, one for him. She filled his bowl with shredded chicken and rice, soft and warm. The scent curled into the air like a quiet invitation. He looked at the bowl, then turned his face away. Linda felt it, the small sting of rejection, but she didn't show it. She simply left the bowl where it was, placed a hand gently on the floor, and said softly, "It's okay. You can take your time." Later that evening, she left the bedroom door cracked open, just enough to let a sliver of hallway light stretch toward the living room, a narrow bridge between her world and his. She lay in bed, eyes wide, in the dark. The house creaked. The wind moved through the trees, and Reggie said nothing. No bark, no sigh, just silence. Linda stared at the ceiling, her chest heavy with thoughts she couldn't name. What if he never trusts me? What if I can't reach him? What if I'm not enough? But even her doubts felt too loud in a space like this. She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes. Then, sometime past midnight, when the world had quieted even more, it came. Not a bark, not a whimper, a sigh. So soft it might have been mistaken for wind slipping beneath the door. A breath held too long, finally released. Not despair, not peace, just a beginning. Linda didn't move. She didn't speak, but her eyes welled up with the kind of tears that don't fall, the kind that settle in the corners, heavy with hope. Somewhere out there, in the hush of a too-quiet house, a broken dog had just breathed. And that was enough. Dawn arrived gently, washing the room in soft amber light that spilled like honey across the floorboards. Linda sat on the edge of her bed, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold, her gaze fixed on the thin beam of sunlight stretching through the doorway. In the living room, Reggie hadn't moved much. He lay exactly where he had the night before. Still, distant, yet no longer coiled, like something bracing to be abandoned. He didn't look toward her, but he didn't hide either. He simply was. And that, Linda thought, was progress. She stood, slowly, quietly, walked down the hallway and past him without pause. Her footsteps were measured, careful not to feel like approach. Reggie's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. She went to the back room, the one she hadn't entered since Rusty had passed, and opened it for the first time in 2 years. Dust greeted her like an old friend. The air held a sleepy scent. Folded fabric, faint dog fur, and old winters. She opened the wooden chest in the corner. Inside were the remnants of a life once lived beside hers. A chewed-up tennis ball, a child's drawing with the words, "Best dog ever," and the yellow raincoat Rusty hated but wore anyway. She held it all, not in grief, but with a gentle kind of reverence. When she returned to the living room, Reggie hadn't moved, but his eyes followed her now. That was new. She didn't speak. Instead, she rolled the old tennis ball across the floor, slow, soft, no expectation. It came to rest beside him, barely touching his paw. He looked at it, then looked away. Linda exhaled, not with disappointment, but with patience. Healing wasn't a miracle. It was a rhythm. She sat a few feet away, cross-legged on the rug, letting the silence stretch between them like a bridge slowly being built, one quiet breath at a time. The days that followed were quiet, not silent, not anymore, but quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the house had started breathing again. Reggie didn't change overnight. He still ate little, still kept to his corner, still avoided eye contact as if it asked too much. But something had softened around the edges. The air no longer felt like waiting for something that wouldn't come. It felt like giving space for something that might. Each morning, Linda left his bowl where he could see it. She didn't hover, didn't ask. Sometimes she'd return to find it empty, sometimes untouched. On the days he ate, she'd let herself smile, even if only for a second. A step forward, no matter how small, was still a step. Then came the morning when she found the bowl licked clean, gently pushed to the edge of his blanket, like a silent thank you. That afternoon, she tried something new. She brought out the tennis ball again, the same one Rusty had chased through snowy fields, now dulled and tooth-marked by time. She sat on the floor and rolled it gently across the room. It stopped halfway between them. Reggie didn't move, not right away. But his eye, the sharp amber one, followed its path. Linda waited, didn't speak, didn't urge. She simply let the ball rest. And after what felt like a held breath, Reggie lifted one paw. He didn't grab the ball. He didn't chase it. He simply tapped it, a single hesitant touch, and sent it rolling back toward her. Linda's throat tightened. She reached out, caught the ball with trembling fingers, and rolled it back again. Another pause, another tap. Back and forth they went. No words, no wagging tails, just the sound of the ball skimming the floor and the shared rhythm of something being built between them. A language of silence, of patience, of beginnings. That night, Linda didn't close her bedroom door. She left it wide, not just cracked, an open invitation, a path with no pressure. Reggie remained in the living room, as always. She lay beneath her blanket listening, not expecting anything, just listening. The hours stretched. Somewhere past midnight she heard it, the soft tap-tap-tap of claws on wooden floor, slow, tentative, like a traveler unsure of his welcome. She didn't move, didn't even breathe too loudly. The steps stopped just outside her door. In the pale wash of moonlight, she saw his shadow, curled low, body pressed to the floor, not inside the room, but near, close enough to share breath. That night, Linda slept better than she had in months, not because the silence had gone, but because it had been joined. The next morning she didn't speak of it, neither did he. But something between them had shifted. When she brewed her tea, she caught him watching her, not intensely, not with expectation, but with curiosity, a thread stretching slowly between them. She didn't tug on it, she just let it be. In the days that followed, Reggie began responding to his name. Not always, but sometimes, his ears would twitch when she said it. Once, when she whispered, "Morning, Reggie," he even turned his head slightly. Not toward her voice, but not away from it either. She took him outside. No leash at first, just the backyard. The wind was crisp, brushing through the grass like invisible fingers. Reggie didn't run. He walked slowly, sniffing patches of earth, standing still for long moments, as if memorizing the scent of safety. Linda watched from the steps, hands in her coat pockets, heart full of quiet hope. He looked back at her once, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw his tail shift. Not a wag, just a suggestion. But to her, it felt like the sound of a locked door beginning to unlatch. Linda began to read again in the evenings. Soft, slow novels with worn covers and gentle prose. She'd sit in her armchair by the window, legs curled under a blanket, a cup of tea at her side. The music she played was barely there. Delicate piano notes that drifted more than played. Reggie never came close, but he didn't hide anymore either. He'd lie near the armchair now, still facing away, but close enough that the rhythm of their breathing sometimes fell in sync. Sometimes she'd speak aloud without looking at him, a line from her book, a comment about the weather, the sound of the wind, just enough to remind him he wasn't alone. One evening, as twilight seeped in and painted the walls lavender, Linda set the tennis ball gently beside him before heading to bed. She said nothing, just left it there. When she awoke the next morning, it had moved, only slightly, but unmistakably. It now sat nearer the hallway. Reggie hadn't taken it to play. He'd moved it to be seen. That night, when she whispered good night and turned off the lamp, she heard the tap-tap of his steps. Slower this time. Not hesitant, not afraid. He lay at the bedroom door again, but this time he turned to face her. She didn't cry. Not really, but her pillow was wet by morning. The third morning after that, she opened a new collar. Simple, brown, soft leather. She didn't approach him with it. Instead, she sat on the floor and waited. Reggie stood from his spot in the corner, walked to her side, and, slowly, lowered his head. Linda slipped the collar around his neck. Her hands didn't shake this time. There was no ceremony, no dramatic turn, just the quiet understanding between two souls who had been waiting for the other to say, in their own way, "I'm still here, and maybe now, I'm ready." The collar fit perfectly. Linda didn't say it aloud, but as the leather wrapped gently around Reggie's neck, her breath caught. Not because it was too tight or too loose, but because it felt right, as if this moment had been waiting in some quiet corner of fate, patient and sure. She clipped the leash on with a soft click. Reggie didn't resist, didn't flinch. He simply stood, gaze calm, posture still. They stepped outside together, morning air wrapping around them like silk. The neighborhood was quiet, early enough that the streets still belonged to the birds and the breeze. Linda walked slowly, watching him from the corner of her eye. Reggie didn't pull. He didn't sniff obsessively or dart toward squirrels. He walked beside her, step for step, like he'd done it 100 times before. At the crosswalk, she reached to signal him to stop, but he was already still, eyes forward, waiting. When the light turned green, he didn't move until she did. Linda blinked, unsure if it was coincidence, but it happened again and again. 3 intersections later, she realized this wasn't a fluke. This was training, old training, not the kind taught in basic obedience classes. This was practiced, second-nature behavior, the kind of calm awareness that came from repetition, from purpose. It unnerved her more than it comforted her, because it meant Reggie wasn't just a stray. He had belonged to someone, and not just anyone. Someone who needed him to behave like this. Someone who had trained him with precision, who had taught him control, discipline, restraint. Someone who had relied on him, and then left him behind. Later that day, they stopped at the park, the same one Linda had visited alone during her darkest weeks. Now she sat on a weathered bench beneath the old oak tree, Reggie lying at her feet like a quiet sentinel. He didn't pull toward birds or children or the smell of food. He didn't explore. He simply lay there, back straight, paws neatly placed, eyes scanning slowly, like a protector on duty. Linda reached out and rested her hand gently on his back. Reggie didn't lean in. He didn't flinch either. He just remained, still and composed, as if he had once learned that stillness was safety. And Linda, for the first time, felt something strange press against her joy, unease. Who had taught this dog to be so careful, so silent, so perfectly invisible? Her hand trailed down his spine. The fur had grown thicker these past weeks, softer. But under it, his body still felt wired, not tense, but ready, like a soldier resting with one eye open. When a child ran past, tripping on a root and tumbling with a cry, Reggie didn't react. He didn't jolt, didn't bark, didn't even flinch. He simply turned his head slightly to observe, then returned to stillness. Linda's heart ached. This wasn't just trauma. This was muscle memory. And that meant he had a story. One she didn't know, one he couldn't tell, but that still lived in every step he took. She looked at him, at the way he always chose to lie between shadow and sun, never fully in the light. "What were you, Reggie?" she whispered. The breeze stirred, and the dog beside her closed his eyes, as if hiding something, even from himself. It happened during a moment so small it might have passed unnoticed, if not for the way it lingered. They were on their usual walk, nearing the park's edge, when Reggie suddenly stopped, not from fear, from recognition. His body leaned forward slightly, his ears perked, and then Linda saw what he saw, a little girl, no more than 6, standing alone, crying softly beside a melting cone of ice cream. Her lavender dress billowed in the wind, stars stitched across the hem like tiny constellations. Linda paused, unsure what to do, but Reggie didn't wait. He stepped forward, not rushing, not crowding. He curved his path, approaching from the side, gentle, deliberate, as if he understood not just that the girl was sad, but how to meet her in it. He stopped at a respectful distance, lowered his head, and slowly licked the spilled ice cream from the grass. The girl blinked at him. Her sobs slowed. A tiny giggle broke free. It was so sudden, that sound, like a bell in fog. She reached out, hesitant, and touched the top of his head. And Reggie wagged his tail. Once, a single soft flick, like a whisper of joy remembered. Linda's breath hitched. She watched the girl's mother approach, frantic and breathless, but the child only pointed and said, "He made me not sad anymore." Later, as they walked home, Linda kept her hand on Reggie's back. He walked beside her, not ahead, not behind. And she realized something. Reggie wasn't just well-trained. He was something else entirely. A dog who had learned to see sadness and stay near it without fear. Not a pet, a companion, a healer. But for all he gave, he still carried something heavy. And until she understood where it came from, Linda feared they would never be truly free of it. The collar tag had always been there, Reggie's first and only possession, a simple brass disc, dulled and scuffed. The words, "If you're reading this, I was loved once," etched deep enough to outlast memory. Linda had touched it many times, almost absently, drawn to the sorrow it carried. But that night, something shifted. She sat at her desk, lamplight casting gold across the surface, and turned the tag over, tracing it again. Her thumb pressed into a faint groove near the edge. Something she hadn't noticed before. A shallow line, subtle, but deliberate. She held it under the lamp, tilted, and then, just beneath the scuffs, she saw it. A second inscription, barely legible beneath the years of rust and time. An address, 124 Fernhill Road, Westbridge. Her heart paused. It wasn't just a message anymore. It was a trail. Linda sat back in her chair, the tag heavy in her palm. She whispered the words aloud, slowly, carefully, as though afraid of speaking a ghost into the room. She looked at Reggie, curled quietly on his blanket by the window. His eyes were closed, but his ears twitched, like he knew. Something stirred in her chest. Not fear, not excitement, but a deep aching responsibility. She could have ignored it. Tossed the tag back into the drawer and kept their quiet routine. But she couldn't. Because if there was even a chance that someone out there once knew Reggie, once loved him, then that part of his story deserved to be found. The next morning, Linda packed lightly. She didn't know what she was walking into, if the house still stood, if anyone lived there, if the truth waiting at the end of this thread would be gentle or sharp. But she knew she had to go. Reggie stood at the door, head slightly tilted, watching her slip the folded map into her coat pocket. He didn't wag his tail, but he didn't hesitate when she opened the car door. They drove in silence. The road to Westbridge curved through pine forests and misted fields, the kind of stretch where time forgets to pass. Linda didn't turn on the radio. She let the hum of tires and the rhythm of Reggie's breath fill the space. When they turned onto Fernhill Road, Linda's stomach tightened. The houses were old here, spaced far apart, shoulders hunched from years of weather. Theirs stood at the very end, a small farmhouse with chipped white paint and a sagging porch, flanked by crooked fences and golden fields. Linda parked at the edge of the driveway. She didn't move. Reggie didn't either. But something about him had changed. His body was alert, not tense, not afraid. Awake, like memory was rising inside him. She opened the door, stepped out, and Reggie followed. His gait was steady, not rushed, not reluctant. As they reached the gate, an old man stepped onto the porch. Tall, stooped, a cane in his hand. His hair white and tousled like wind had been living in it for years. He stopped when he saw them. His eyes locked on Reggie. And something, time, thought, breath, broke open between them. He whispered, barely audible, "Tucker." Reggie didn't move at first. Then, slowly, as if each step carried the weight of 1,000 yesterdays, he walked toward the man. One step, then another. The cane trembled in the man's hand. His mouth opened, not to speak, but to breathe, as if remembering how to let air pass again after years of forgetting. Reggie stopped, just inches away. He lowered his head, pressed it gently against the man's leg, and the man, who had seemed carved from wood moments before, crumbled. He dropped the cane, sank to his knees. His hands, gnarled and shaking, reached for Reggie's face. "Tucker," he whispered again, "you came home." Linda stood back, unable to speak. She didn't need to. The air was thick with reunion, with regret, with love that had waited far too long. The man finally looked up at her. His voice cracked like old wood. "He was my son's. My boy was a Marine. Tucker was his whole world." He paused, pain painting every word. "After the accident, they told me no one survived. But 2 days later, Tucker showed up at my door, covered in mud, blood on his coat." He swallowed hard. "I couldn't do it. Couldn't bear to see him without my son. I pushed him away, closed the door." Linda felt her throat tighten. She glanced at Reggie. No, Tucker, resting quietly in the man's arms. His eyes were open, watching, accepting. The man reached for Linda, offering the leash back. "He's yours now," he said. "You brought him back to life. Not just to me, but to himself." Linda didn't take the leash right away. She knelt beside them, placing a hand gently on Tucker's back, and for the first time, he leaned into it. Not out of obligation, but out of trust, out of choice. The drive home was quieter than the one before, not heavy but full. The kind of silence that follows answers long buried. Linda didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Tucker sat in the passenger seat, just as still as Reggie once had. But something had changed. His body was no longer locked in stillness. It was grounded, present. As the house came into view, Linda exhaled softly. Her fingers rested on the steering wheel like she was holding a thread. Delicate, but no longer fraying. When they stepped inside, Tucker didn't retreat to his old corner. He walked with calm purpose toward the cushion by the window, the one he had always passed without notice. This time, he circled once, then laid down. The late afternoon light spilled across the floor. Linda sat across from him, her eyes still damp, the weight of the old man's story sitting beside her like a quiet friend. Tucker had once belonged to someone who needed him to survive grief. Now, he belonged to someone who understood it. That evening, she opened the wooden chest once more. This time, not in mourning, but in offering. She took out the tennis ball, worn, old, and slightly frayed at the edges, like all good memories. She sat beside Tucker, rolled it softly toward him. He watched it, and then, gently, nudged it back. A simple exchange, a quiet game, a promise, spoken not in words, but in rhythm. They played like that for a long while. No rush, no rules, just the soft sound of the ball and the softer breath between tosses. Linda smiled. It wasn't a beginning, not anymore. It was something after. As autumn deepened, the days took on a golden hush. Leaves rustled like whispers outside the window, and the air turned brisk enough for blankets and long walks in the afternoon sun. Tucker, no longer just Reggie, no longer just a shadow, moved through the house like he belonged there. Not quietly, not loudly, just naturally. He didn't need to be near Linda all the time, but he always knew where she was. And when she moved from one room to the next, his eyes often followed her, not with worry, not with fear, but with a gentle kind of loyalty that didn't ask anything back. One evening, Linda found him asleep by the fireplace, the brass tag from his collar glinting faintly in the low light. She picked it up from the table and held it once more, turning it over in her hand. The words were still there. "If you're reading this, I was loved once. But now, They didn't hurt. They reminded her that love lost was still love lived, that someone had trained Tucker to be strong, and someone else had taught him how to heal. She looked at him, curled peacefully on the rug, and whispered, "You were loved before, and you are loved again." Tucker stirred at her voice. He didn't get up, but his tail thumped softly, twice, against the floor. Linda laughed, not loudly, but fully. The kind of laugh that wraps around your ribs and warms the room. It echoed once, then settled, like sunlight on skin. That night, as Linda prepared for bed, she left the door open, as she always did now. Tucker didn't need to be invited in. He knew the rhythm of the house, the unspoken permissions between hearts, learning to trust again. She lay down, pulling the blanket to her chin, eyes adjusting to the dark, and then she heard it. Soft paws on old wood, the gentle sigh of a body curling down, not at the threshold this time, inside. Tucker lay at the foot of the bed, not out of habit, but choice. Not guarding, not testing, just being. Linda didn't move. She didn't reach for him. She simply breathed, slowly, deeply, knowing he could hear it. They had both come a long way from silence, and now, in this quiet room, under the low song of wind outside, they rested. Two hearts, one story, no longer unfinished.